Okay, let's jump to the main ledger. That's going to be an interesting topic. So how you would push liquid staking activity into the main ledger, and by push we mean syncing journal entries into a main ledger. In this context, being a fiat ledger like accounting software like Xero or NetSuite, QuickBooks, for example. Um, what are some of the strategies that you think are optimal?
Yeah, just I guess as far as taking all that data and then trying to put it in, mangle it into some kind of accounting form where we can clearly put it into our system and then spit it out into a lovely financial statement. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. So trying to get that data,
Yeah,
complex data, basically syncing it into a digestible way for a fiat ledger, essentially for statements, right? Financial statements.
yeah. I think like if we're talking to the accountants, like I think probably the first and most challenging part is actually like parsing this data that comes through from chain, because a lot of the time you don't necessarily know what happens. It could be someone else in your team that some interaction on some smart contract and there wasn't any kind of receipt of token, or there. It's very hard to track a lot of this a lot of the time. And I think one of my biggest pet peeves is also seeing the function calls that a lot of developers create. Is basically no consistency, and they can just call any kind of function whatever they want, and then it's up to you to kind of interpret what actually happened. So I think that's kind of like the first end is obviously getting that data in correctly and understanding what is coming from the blockchain and what interaction we did, and then from there, understanding how you record that correctly. If it's kind of an internal transfer from wallet to wallet, maybe that's easy. If it's a swap, it might be a little bit easier. But then if it gets a little bit more complex, like we're talking about with LP tokens, how do we segregate those? How do we ultimately classify them? And then, so once we do classify them, how do we now take it to the next step where we take these classifications? And then, I guess for my personal preference, I then take that classification and I try to assign it accounting GL line item within my trial balance, which then is I guess where we kind of earn our money, trying to interpret a lot of these transactions and trying to give meaning to them in a kind of more general finance framework that others can clearly understand when they're looking at your statements. Um, I guess for me, like I try to round them all up into one account and just kind of keep one digital asset account, and that's where a subledger is crucial in my mind. Instead of jamming every single entry that happens, for those, I mean, who operate a lot in the ecosystem, they'll know there can be a ton of transactions just in one day. So in actually pushing those all through sometimes doesn't make sense. Uh, but when you have a subledger and you can see all the transactions, you can see all the classifications, you can add your notes, you can add all this stuff to it. That's when it makes a little bit more sense. And maybe that's a better way to analyze it than actually just trying to shove it into your typical accounting framework of your NetSuites or your Zeros or whatever, QuickBooks, whatever they might be. Um, Obviously, those systems are not necessarily designed to intake transactions with 16 decimal places and some any different kind of currencies. So I think that's where the subledger is really important. So classifying, giving them a line item on your trial balance, and then pushing those line items through maybe monthly helps just to get those items, those expenses, those revenues, whatever they might be, into your general ledger. And then if you want to drive down into further detail, that's where I would typically kind of look behind the scene, look at the subledger, and figure out the specifics of what happened, and try to drive some valuable insights out of that information versus, I guess, trying to push it into accounting system and then work backwards. So yeah, I guess long-winded. It's probably um, for me, I guess, to get into a subledger, it's a monthly thing. I'll review everything. I'll make sure that everything reconciles, that my digital asset account balance reconciles, and from there, I'll push kind of a bigger entry just to summarize all of the activity for the month. and then really rely on some kind of external service or external software that helps me track better.
For clients, for companies, Web3 companies using crypto subledgers, syncing their journal entries into main ledger, so fiat ledger softwares, accounting softwares, do you envision accountants finding it valuable to sync function calls along with their journal entries? Or do you think because anyone can create a function call, maybe it's too arbitrary?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think it's a dangerous game, especially once you start like pushing that into your financial software, whatever that might be. It might be good, but even still, like that function call is not going to tell you everything, or still you a lot you have to interpret. A lot of the time, it ends up just saying something random like transfer, but meanwhile, you've done like some extensive flash loan or something where there's been a ton happen under the hood, but you just see kind of one line item, and actually picking that exact line item that you want to show is difficult. So I think that's where I think a lot of the work can be done on kind of front running, or I guess having classification rules set up so that you start to capture all of these use cases within your subledger. And then you just take that function call and you just try to automate it the best you can based on a certain set of rules that you've tried to kind of build out in your system or on typical transactions that you're used to. And then going from there, and then actually just taking that, maybe that classification is what's more important, or maybe some notes that you add on the transaction. But the function call itself is still just a product of the blockchain. And at that point, it's kind of at the mercy of whatever some developer tried to create for this function call. So I think that becomes quite difficult. I think the real value is maybe trying to automate your processes and really help yourself by creating rules for a lot of these transactions, and understanding the interaction with different contracts and what those typically mean, and then just trying to tag and auto classify and just automate as much as possible.
Yes, it seems like we're trying to see the developer world connect to the accounting world here in this instance. Would you say
It's the
that?
accounting world trying to connect to the developer world. I think they'll
Oh,
continue
right,
to do their
yes,
thing.
the other way around. Yeah, you're right. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
would you say that we're really, really early in terms of before we're going to see any type of liquid staking reporting standards anytime soon?
Yeah, I would like to optimistically say no, it should be just around the corner, but maybe certain jurisdictions actually have put it together, like a little bit more clarity on the guidance. I know UK is doing a good job of this. I know Europe has a lot of good regulation in the pipeline. Um, some other countries, not so much, but I, yeah, I think it's still going to be a little bit before we get there. I think it's kind of going to continue to be on us to build out what we think makes sense, and kind of come to a thesis on why is this reasonable, why should we record it like this, and then just really support that opinion. I think, and in order to do so, I think people really need to understand what's going on. So I think that level or depth of knowledge is really important. And then hopefully from there, it starts to get a little bit easier. Yeah, like it's definitely something hard to just come into, pick up, and understand right away. I think it's something that you like really have to have a passion for, and want to learn, and want to be a part of. Um, yeah, again, I think it's with like a lot of things in crypto, maybe the UI UX is not quite where it needs to be. So this tooling still needs to be developed, and we still need to really work on an understanding of what the best way is to record these assets, and how we do that kind of collectively. I think would be great, and I think there's a good couple of groups or a good few communities now that are playing a part in that. So it's nice to have others be along for this journey.
Absolutely, I'm excited to see reporting standards come into play and see a little bit more universal type of reporting for liquid staking.